testing in the cloud or cloud testing. Now, what is involved as part of cloud testing itself? What we want to do is, in terms of being agile, what is the testing scope going to be? Because in the agile methodology, your testing scope keeps on changing as per the client's requirement, in terms of product development. Or based on the client requirement. So that's the benefit of working in agile methodology when you are testing in the cloud terminology, where you can set up any particular test instance, any test environment as and when needed. So that's the benefit of working in cloud environment with respect to agile methodology. And the other thing is, cloud environment also gives you flexibility, to get started as and when we need it. So as I mentioned, we can set up the environment as and when needed and change the environment configurations based on our requirements. Now, exactly what is involved as part of testing in the cloud or cloud testing as per se? Because I would not want to, just differentiate it between both the words. Although there is a difference, what I would like to say is cloud testing involves the actual testing of any application that is deployed in the cloud environment. Now, we can call it as a testing as a service, because what we are trying to do is we are trying to sell our product, but with the same application, what we are trying to do is we are trying to sell the testing as a service as well. Because when a product is deployed into cloud environment, we have to test it from different configuration as the client is going to use that system. So those are the parameters that we have to keep in mind when testing in the cloud. So we could say that we are providing testing as a service when we are talking about cloud testing. On the other side, there is a very good use case for us to reuse the same environment and reproduce the issue. Sometimes in the traditional environment, what may happen is, as a testers, if you find certain issues and we are trying to reproduce them, we are able to do it. Then when we hand over those issues to developers and other people, what may happen is if the issue gets deferred and after some time if our test environment is not available, it gets really difficult for us to reproduce those issues. And the developer may say that they are also not able to reproduce the issue, so they may not want to fix those issues. But that becomes very easy in terms of cloud environment, where the environment is available as and when needed. So you can reproduce those kind of issues whenever, as a tester, whenever we want. So that is another benefit of using cloud environment. There are a lot of servers available online as per our service agreement that we have with the vendor. We could make use of those test environments as and when needed. Those are the things that is involved as part of cloud testing as per se. Now, after going through all of this, what I would like to just showcase is the differences between different cloud-based testing models that are available in the market today. Before going through all of this and explaining the differences, I would like to talk about what is IAAS, infrastructure as a service, what is PAAS, it's a platform as a service, and SaaS, it's a software as a service. We'll talk about all this in detail after certain slides, but let's just go through the comparison right now so that it gives us a clear bit of idea of what is involved when we're talking about different cloud-based models. When we talk about traditional computing model, all of the applications or the platforms or the infrastructure that are being hosted inside the organization. When we, as per the same thing, when we talk about infrastructure as a service, we are just trying to utilize the infrastructure services that are being provided by third-party vendors. And the application as well as the platforms will be provided by our own organizations. That way, what we don't have to worry about the maintenance or the all the other tasks or costs related to the infrastructure, housing costs. So all those things we don't have to worry about. That's the benefit of using infrastructure as a service. When we talk about platform as a service, we are trying to rent out the platforms and infrastructure, again, as I've talked about, from the cloud services vendor that are available in the market, and only the application will be hosted inside our organization or on those platforms, so it will be hosted and completely monitored by our own organization. That's the utilization of platform as a service. Whereas in software as a service, we are trying to deploy everything on a third-party environment, where we are trying to rent, the infrastructure, the platforms, and the application. Application will be built by us, but it will be hosted online into the cloud environment. So that's where we don't have to worry about hosting space or cost of the infrastructure or buying the web server or the environment licenses or any other software licenses or all those kind of things. We don't have to worry about when we are talking about software as a service kind of application. And when we talk about the terminology that is being used, when we talked about it earlier, testing in the cloud, when we talk about infrastructure as a service and platform as a service, those two things come under the testing in the cloud. What we are trying to do is we have the application and we are trying to test those applications utilizing cloud-based services that are available. But for software as a service, what we would call it as a cloud testing, because the application itself has been deployed deployed in the cloud, and it can be utilized by our customers as well, while directly from the cloud itself. And we are also trying to utilize platforms and infrastructure available on the cloud. So that is where the major difference comes into picture. Now, when we talk about different types of testing that we have to account for, in the traditional computing model, we just have to account for some functional and non-functional testing. But with respect to that, when we talk about infrastructure, we have to account for functional, non-functional testing, security testing, availability of infrastructure, and multi-tenancy, where multiple people could utilize the same hardware as and when needed. Something like if I'm only utilizing those resources for half a day or so, the other people can utilize the same infrastructure for another half day or so. So that's where multi-tenancy comes into the picture, and we have to account for that as well while testing the same application. When we talk about platform as an infrastructure, we have to test for functionality, security, availability of the system, scalability in terms of availability of different environments as and when needed. As for specifically for testing teams, generally sometimes what may happen is we maintain different testing environments with the same environment but using different configurations. So that is where we could utilize this cloud environment where the different types of configurations are available as and when needed. Now, it depends on the vendor if they are willing to give us that kind of flexibility of changing the configuration as needed or doing the customization as needed, or otherwise they could help us set up a new instance with the customizations that we want. So that is that's kind of up in the air. How it depends on us how when we select a vendor, we have to accommodate for all those things when choosing a vendor as well as deciding on application itself. When we talk about software as a service model, we have to check for functionality, scalability, data integrity, security, availability, and multi-tenancy. We specifically talk about data integrity because now we are deploying our application itself into cloud. So we have to make sure that the application code will not be compromised. We have to ensure there is enough security so that unauthorized people cannot get access to our code and all code repository and everything else. So that is what we have to test before deploying the actual application into cloud, and then only will allow our customers to utilize that application. So that is basic difference between these three models. Now let's talk about each of these models that we talked about in detail. What is SaaS, PAAS, and infrastructure as a service? SaaS is basically any general purpose application that is customized according to customer needs and deployed into cloud environment so that our customers or third-party people can utilize it based on their own configuration. So this kind of applications are basically have configuration parameters so that the application behavior may change a bit based on the configurations that we have selected. That is in general what SaaS model is. But obviously there are different testing challenges involved when testing any SaaS-based application. The first thing I've heard from a lot of people as well as we have experienced ourselves is the integration with the legacy application. Whenever we want to deploy any existing application into cloud environment, we have to ensure that whatever application that we are planning to deploy into cloud environment is integrated with the legacy application that we have running in our enterprises. If that doesn't happen, obviously the existing customers won't be happy and probably will lose out on the credibility that we have built so far. Same thing in this with respect to compliance with standards. Let's talk about specific industries in which there are government standards being defined rigorously. Let's talk about healthcare industry or defense industry for that matter, where we have to follow certain standards. And whenever we are deploying any application into a cloud environment, we also have to ensure that the vendor who is providing this cloud services also follow certain standards that are being defined for their own usage, as well as for the application that we are trying to deploy in that environment. So that becomes a challenge when we talk about testing. And obviously, one of the most important things is reliability and robustness of the service that they are providing. We have to ensure that the services are available almost 24/7, so that none of our customers get affected if they are using our cloud-based application. So these are some of the challenges that we have to account for when testing or deploying any application into our environment. After talking about challenges, now we need to understand the approach that we want to talk. We have to consider when testing any SaaS-based application. What we have to do is assess the testing needs. Okay, when we are deploying that application, we have to, as we have said, cloud-based applications. When we talk SaaS-based applications, would have certain different parameters that each customer may want to use it in a different way. So we have to assess all the different testing needs, and based on that, we have to decide which kind of environments that we want to test it with, what are the different configurations that we have to account for, and all those things. Understand customer usage patterns. Where we also have to account for when, let's say, our targeted customer base is youngsters, and we have to also ensure that we include this kind of usage patterns as part of our test strategy. And the third point itself says that prepare the test strategy. So while preparing the test strategy, we have to account for this kind of customer usage patterns that we find out based on market analysis and everything. After preparing the test strategy would include what do we want to test it with, how do we want to test it, what are the different environments that we are going to test it in, so on and so forth. So all these things will become part of our test strategy. And after defining all this, then only we'll start preparing our test environment in the cloud. If we need multiple test environments, we'll go ahead and build our environment based on our needs. So that is the testing approach that we have followed so far when testing any SaaS-based application. Let us get some more idea about what platform as a service is. Basically, platform as a service is basically used for delivering operating systems and associated services for developing and testing any application on a pay-per-use model. So that is what, I mean, it's basically self-explanatory, but still, when people get confused about platforms and infrastructure, there is a bit of difference. When we talk about platforms involve different types of softwares, commercial softwares, operating system softwares, and all those things. Whereas when we talk about infrastructure involves the actual physical hardware, storage devices, the servers themselves, or the network equipments. So that is the basic difference between platform and infrastructure. Now, there are benefits of using platform as a service from a cloud service provider, which basically states that when we use platform as a service, it definitely improves the speed, flexibility, and agility for our teams as well, so that it becomes really easy for us to, just come up with an instance based on our need and get the development started or get the testing started. There is a built-in scalability and elasticity to provide efficiency in terms of PAAS model, whereas you can, as we talked about earlier, when we talk about scalability, it's very easy to keep on adding number of systems based on our testing needs, or let's say if the load on one of our servers is getting to the maximum limit that we have on the server, we can just put up another instance of the same server and then try to use a load balancer in terms of distributing the load between different servers that we have available, and that becomes pretty easy in terms of platform as a service, or would rather say infrastructure as a service for that matter. That would come under that. But it becomes easy when you are working in the cloud environment. And then obviously for a mid-sized organization or a startup, obviously when you are using cloud environment, it definitely increases your ROI with the lower cost of ownership. When you just getting started, obviously you do not want to invest a lot of money into your business and just want to see how you're growing initially, and then only if you decide, you can go ahead and spend some money in building your own infrastructure and everything. But till that time, using cloud environment for PAAS and infrastructures definitely helps, improve the ROI. Obviously, as you talked about SaaS, there are different challenges involved in platform as a service. Those are reliability and security. When we talk about different licensing models or licensed software that are available, we have to ensure that those softwares as well as the usability and reliability of those softwares are very it basically needs our requirement, and we have to ensure that the reliability in terms of availability of those licensed softwares is available on time. And initially we talked about the customization of the environment. If some cloud vendors may not be able to provide the different types of customization or may not allow you to customize your environment as and when needed. So that is also we have to account for when that becomes a challenge when we want to test the same application using different customization. If you have to keep on asking for different instances of the same environment, it's a bit time consuming and that becomes a bit of challenge. And when we talk about we talked about increased ROI in the initial phases of our application, but when we talk about long-term ROI, let's say application is getting stable and the business has improved a lot, and that after that point of time, the pay-per-use model probably accounts for probably diluted ROI, or probably even you are paying more in terms of using the cloud environment. So that becomes a challenge that you have to account for. You have to just do your calculations and decide what approach is best for your own organization. Let's talk about infrastructure as a service. Basically, infrastructure as a service is a pay-per-use model where service provider rents the equipment that support operations, including, as we've talked about, storage, hardware, servers, networking components. And another important thing is that we do not have to take care of maintenance or the housing of all this equipment. That is being taken care by the service provider themselves. So when we talk about the benefits of this kind of approach, obviously you can see that we are being very agile, and probably it would include low cost at the startup, as we do not have to invest in a lot of flooring space for keeping all these amounts and worry about the maintenance cost of things. So that becomes really easy in terms of using the infrastructure being provided by a vendor. Fast access to different environments that we talk about it. When we talk about actually procuring any hardware related equipment, it becomes a headache because we have to ask for quotes and then decide on the vendor and then order, and then delivery of the order takes some time. But when we want to hire the service from cloud, it becomes very easy, and it becomes very fast for us to utilize that infrastructure that is available from the vendor. That is very well suited for development, testing, web hosting, or batch processing activities in terms of the infrastructure availability. So that's benefit of using IAAS. Now, there are also challenges, as we talked about, for both SaaS and PAAS. The challenge is the quality of service, the quality of the infrastructure that is being provided. If, let's say, if the hardware crashes, if there is no backup available, then it gets really difficult for us to do the work that we are supposed to do. And another thing is data integrity and security. As we are utilizing their infrastructure, we also have to ensure that the information stored on those infrastructure that we are hiring from someone else is secure enough for us to rely on them. And the resource allocation and monitoring, as we are utilizing their resources or their infrastructure, we also have to have the capability of monitoring those infrastructure to ensure that we are able to decide when we want to hire an extra instance of the same infrastructure, or we want to reduce the usage of our existing infrastructure. How do we want to go forward with that? So those are the challenges that we have to account for. I mean, as testers also, we have to think about all these things when deciding before starting testing in the cloud environment. So these are some things that we have to consider. Now, after just giving this brief overview about all the different models, I'll just talk about some terminology or some criteria that you can consider before moving to cloud or before actually start the cloud testing piece of things. And what are those things? obviously when deciding on using any services from any particular vendor, we have to check the number of outages that vendor has in last year, 2 years, or 3 years before in the past. So that is one thing that we can take a look and decide if the reliability, from the reliability perspective, are the services available on time. So all those things. Other thing is we can create a matrix of platforms that we want to test with. If the vendor is not able to provide the matrix that where we have defined all the environments or all the instances that we have defined as part of the matrix, obviously we have to ensure that all the instances that we as defined in the matrix are available and being accounted for. After we decide on the matrix, what we can start doing is analyze and test the application on the platforms that are being provided by the vendor. Analyze in terms of what are the configurations that are being provided, what are the changes that we could do from our side, how if the application functionality is working properly on each and every environment. So those are some of the things that we can account for as part of we should consider before starting the testing part of things. And then tailor the infrastructure for a specific workload. If we feel like that our workload is only going to increase after 6 months or after 1 year down the line, then we also have to account for that while deciding on a strategy for moving to cloud. Then that is another thing that we have talked about. We have to have properly defined guidelines for public and private cloud usage. Sometimes what may happen is companies go ahead and decide that they want to build and use an in-house cloud, and they also want to utilize some services being provided from the public cloud. But that has to be clearly defined guidelines that business critical applications cannot be deployed on the public cloud or whatever. As an organization, we have to decide these guidelines and ensure that these guidelines are defined before we start testing in the cloud environment. And as and when we start testing, we have to test as obviously before starting the testing, we have to check for multi-tenancy, availability, performance, and scalability of the environment that we are choosing. So these are certain things that we have to account for, or we need to consider when moving to cloud in terms of testing any application. Initially, when we started this presentation, we talked about, well, just give you some brief, demo of how all of the things can be tested in a test automation. Now let's talk about TestingWhiz, which is a test automation tool that we have developed, that is being developed by Cygnet Infotech. What it does in the agile world, test automation itself is a necessity. Probably, as all of you may be aware of it. But we want to utilize it fully in the cloud environment. How do you do that? That's a question that comes up on everybody's mind. How do you utilize any particular test environment in a cloud setup? So I'll just give you a brief, demo of how we could utilize TestingWhiz to make sure that we are able to cover all the test automation efforts in the agile world. Just hang on. What I would like to showcase in this instance is, as we have developed a couple of scripts. If you have a cloud environment already defined or already available in your environment, you could make use of this testing tool, test automation tool, which is a codeless test automation tool, and test your application in such a way that you will be able to utilize the cloud environment and run the same script again and again, or multiple instances of time, as well as simultaneously on different instances that are available, different operating systems or different browsers that is available to you. Here what I would like to showcase you is we'll just run the same script across different browsers, and as I've said, when you have a cloud environment available to you, this same script can be run in the cloud environment in a parallel mode. Right now I'm just going to execute it one by one, but it shows us that you can execute the same script simultaneously on multiple browsers, and all the results will be compared accordingly if the scripts are working properly across all the different browsers. That is basically a need probably across all the different testing applications that you have to ensure for compatibility testing. If this is basically a web-based application, so that is what you could accomplish using TestingWhiz. Test any application, any functionality across different browsers. In this particular scenario, what we're trying to do is just taking a Boston Globe, and they have a newspaper edition, that is digital edition. We are trying to register for that digital edition and ensure that our order gets processed properly. There is another cool feature of this particular testing tool. That is, what you could do is, after initially all of your scripts are ready, whenever when you want to, whenever there are any changes being happening in the application, you can just schedule your application or this automation script execution. What will happen is, once you schedule your any operation, as part of an operation you can define a number of test suites that you want to get executed on a daily basis or an hourly basis. You can define all those things, and once you define it, it will automatically pick up the test scripts that you defined. It will run, execute those scripts, and directly send you a test report. That becomes really easy for us to identify on a regular basis that if our application is functioning properly, at least from the business critical aspect, or not. So that is obviously an interesting thing to take. I won't go into detail about that because as probably we do not have enough time left, but if you want to know, we'll talk more about TestingWhiz at the end of this demo itself. And if you are, I'll just showcase what when I talked about. So now, as you see, the first script was played perfectly on Mozilla Firefox, and you can go to the detailed results and find out all the steps were passed or failed, and all those details, what exactly we did, and all those details can be found out from the report. Now we'll execute the same script on a different browser. Initially we executed the script on the Firefox. Now we are going to execute this on Google Chrome and ensure that the same functionality is working on Google Chrome as well. Sometimes the execution is a bit faster on Google Chrome, so but there is a feature available in the tool itself where you can slow the execution part of things itself to ensure that all things are being captured. That's a brief overview of what TestingWhiz does. There are a lot of good features available, other features available as well. But going back to our original point, this can be utilized very favorably in terms of being agile or in agile environment where you have already defined scripts as and when, as per your sprint requirements. You just have to ensure that at least if you want to do regression testing on per sprint basis, you can just utilize this kind of environment, and any tester who doesn't even know any kind of coding languages or programming languages still can go ahead and create the script. As you see, this script has also passed. And now I'll just showcase where you can define the schedule that I just talked about. You can add a job, create a job name, select your test project where all of your test suites are residing, trigger whereas you want to execute the script on an every minute basis, every day, and the browser on which you want to get it executed, as well as you can write down the email address where you want to send the report after test execution. So you just define it and just store it itself, and the tool itself will take care of it, execution and sending you the report. So you just have to go through the report and find out if things are working properly or not. So that's another cool feature that you could definitely utilize in the cloud environment. That gives a brief overview of TestingWhiz capabilities in the Agile world in terms of test automation. Now we'll get back to our presentation. As we showcase our ability in term for TestingWhiz, what I would like to say is, if anybody is interested, they can just definitely go ahead and if you have any question in terms of TestingWhiz itself, or if you have any question related to cloud testing, that whatever we talked about as part of this webinar, please get in touch with us at info@cygnetinfotech.com. Please send us your queries, and we'll definitely answer your questions. Related to those questions itself.
Definitely, sounds good. I'm very happy to do that.
Thanks, Puff. Thank you for attending this webinar, and thanks everybody who has attended this webinar. If you have any questions, please feel free to write an email at info@cygnetinfotech.com. And also, if you're interested to know more about TestingWhiz, obviously you can register on the webinar as you talked about earlier. So once again, thank you for attending this webinar. If you have any questions, please get back to us. Thank you for your time.